I do not have it here.
All right. Well, we'll make it work. Okay. I'll just. Well, Pastor Michael, that is not a butterfly in the sky, but I do believe our listeners can go twice as high. Take a look, guys. It's time for Reading Restless. Reading Restless. Let's check in how things are going here this month. The month of, well, Pastor Michael, how are you doing? How are you doing as a reader? How's your life?
It's been good. It's been really good. As we record this, I'm fresh day one off of a 2-week vacation that we spent most of the time in Florida on the beach. We brought home a little bit of sand from the beach and we left them with record-breaking snowfall.
And we are glad you got out of there before that, because if there is one thing that it's unsure if they are able to survive, it is any level of snowfall.
It was hilarious to drive through like very mild flurries on the interstate on the way back. And a lot of folks in Alabama just driving so slow, so worried about this. What you and I would just consider like a normal day. You're not slowing down at all. You're used to it. You know how to handle it. It was very, very funny.
That's right. So, Pastor Michael, before we are going to give a little bit of feedback on our books, the book we read last month, or any books the books in this theme we read last month. But let me promo February. There's still time to read with Restless. This isn't your New Year's resolution that you gave up on January 10th or whatever.
I haven't even started my New Year's resolutions. Everything was waiting till after the vacation, and now I feel like my life is just getting back to normal. And so I haven't even started those.
That's the perfect way to do this, because then you avoid did you know they did this study that maybe you've heard of this, Quitter's Day? The second day in January is known as Quitter's Day, because they've done studies and they've repeatedly found 80% of New Year's resolutions are given up on.
That's a pretty bad day. I would expect at least like you get to February. That's pretty bad. If you're giving up as of day 2, well, that's pretty bad.
So Pastor Michael has found a life hack. Everyone loves a life hack. Life hack from Pastor Michael. Don't start your New Year's resolution till February.
Don't start till February.
Boom. There you go. That's how you fix your Bible reading plan too. All right. So in January, we will be discussing a dead book by a dead Russian. But in February, you can join us. And I know you can join us on our February reading, because what we are reading is a book you already own. This is perfect, everybody.
Great.
Look at your shelf right now. Look at that book you bought and you never read because you kept buying books. Now, if that book happens to be Out of the Ashes by Anthony Esolen, you can read it with me. I would love to discuss it with you. Phenomenally interesting book. I started just a bit early here in January.
I'm not keeping super close to our schedule in that, like, I also have started my February book. I'm going to read No Country for Old Men, which I had started already on my vacation, but I read, because it was vacation, I read like 10 pages.
Yeah.
and the rest of the time I spent just enjoying the beach and my family.
It is a classic dad on vacation room. I bring this great vacation book and you're like, oh, wait, my kids are not going to be like, perfect. This is the point where we all read our Cormac McCarthy vacation book.
Gather around, children, while I read us a book and I'm reading it at the table.
So if you happen to have No Country for Old Men on your shelf, you're allowed to read it. If you don't have either of those books in your possession already, this is the one month of the year you're not allowed to buy them. Do not read these books this month. Yeah. Just don't. Don't be like, oh, but I can get it on the library audiobook app. No, don't cheat. Don't lie. What we would rather you do is send us a message with what the actual book is.
Yeah, let us know. Hit us up on Twitter or email us. It'd be fun to talk about the list of books that we get in from people.
That would be really fun. And we would And probably as long as we do this, I think this is a perfect category every year because it will probably almost always be the case. So,
Yep.
So get ready to read a book, even if this is just the only month you do it. Get ready February to read a book you already own. Perfect. But Pastor Michael, January, we embraced the cold January, and we did reading a book by a dead Russian. And I, confessing my limited, though I did realize I had a little bit more than I originally thought, my limited fluency with the dead Russians, took your recommendation. And I know many other people did too, because I heard from them and said, what is this strange book? I thought of very early in January was, what is this very strange book? Have you started it? Do you have thoughts on this? That Pastor Michael recommended. So, Pastor Michael, well, the book was Notes from the Underground. And so, Pastor Michael, tell us, because I believe when you recommended it, you said this is whether usually audiobook, having read it, but this is almost an annual reread for you at some point in the year.
Yeah, and I did it. I reread it, this is how I feel about Notes from the Underground. I usually get to the end, and I feel like, should I just start that over again? That's how much I love this book. I really do. There are very few books that make me feel the darkness of sin like this book does.
I did help the person who asked me this question by saying, and you did preface
keep reading.
And you preface the book that way, that this was a book about what's wrong, right? So, Pastor Michael, I want to hear. Give us some thoughts on the book. I can give my cursory reactions as we go. And so, but anyways, go, give us something.
Yeah. I wish I just ran to look. I must have loaned out my copy of this book, which is such a dumb thing for me to do because I probably have extra copies of this book. Maybe it's at my church office. I don't know. But I was going to get my copy of it where I have all my notes and things and underlines. But alas, I do not have it. So this is all off the top of my head. If I get something wrong, forgive me. I listened through it on audio recently, but it's been a couple of weeks since I finished that. So Notes from the Underground, if you read it with us, you know this, but or maybe you don't realize what it is, but it's basically the telling of different stories from the perspective of what you could consider a kind of underground man. What I would describe, this is my description. This is not, I don't even believe Dostoevsky uses this kind of language at all. But what I would describe as a deeply narcissistic person.
Mm-hmm.
And not just deeply narcissistic and hyperbolized in some way, but also something that if you're at least willing to grapple with it, probably also reminds you a lot of ways that you've thought before. And of the way that honestly a lot of people think. So it starts with just these kind of reflections about man. And it's interesting, if you've ever read by the way, C.S. Lewis's why am I blanking on the name right now? What's Orual and I don't know why I'm blanking.
Do you mean That Hideous Strength?
No. His best book. It's one of my favorite books ever, and I must just be out of my mind that I'm not thinking about it because and it's going to drive me crazy. I literally cannot stop until I remember them. Till we have faces.
Oh yeah.
I don't know why.
If I finish if I finish Out of the Ashes, that is another book that's been sitting on my shelf for a long time that I will be finishing in February. That is not the official You Can Read It Along With Me book in February, though, just to be clear.
Highly recommend that one too. But it in my opinion, Notes from the Underground too has some similarities in that I don't think you're going to be able to grasp exactly what you're reading until you get to the end.
I completely agree with that. Let me just say that I think one of the most difficult parts of the book, and I think why even the person I spoke to about the book early on had the reaction, and it was my reaction at various points, is,
Yep.
and I actually, when you said, I want to read this again, I completely identified with that, because I felt like at the end of the book, finally, I gained a ton more understanding of what I was reading in the book.
Yes. So it begins with like these almost like philosophical thoughts.
That's right.
Inside some man's head, right? Like it's just like these thoughts and ideas intertwined with, some stories. But toward the end, you get into a much more story-oriented narrative format, where the writer of the book, the author of the book, is telling you something that happened to them, longer form. And then after that, kind of goes back to some of his defense of himself and things like that. And that it's that narrative that I think is going to shed light on what exactly is going on. Because I don't think, because we're Westerners and because most of us don't read a lot, I think often we start a book like this, and when there's somebody, a character that's making an argument, right? That's trying to lay out some facts or ideas about things. We read it didactically, as if we're supposed to, from the start, just be like, okay, here's how I'm supposed to think of this. But actually, if you read the whole, you realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm supposed to understand this is a particular kind of person. Right? What I would describe as a narcissist explaining the world from their perspective.
Okay.
And once you see that the actual narrative that takes place of this man and how he feels this kind of this, existential angst all the time, and this deep bitterness toward people that literally never think about him, but he assumes, because his whole worldview revolves around him, he assumes everybody is watching him and critiquing him and thinking about him all of the time. And he can't get that out of his mind. And so he has to create these grand plans of what he's going to do to kind of show all these people how he is, so much greater than they think, and he's so much better than them, and all these horrible things that they've thought of him and done to him, he's going to get back at them. And then he's just left with he can't actually do that, because nobody cares about him, because nobody was thinking about him, because the world doesn't revolve around you, right? Because it doesn't actually, nobody's thinking about you the way that you are. You're just a narcissist. You're thinking about yourself in a way that is untrue, because you can't not simply dwell upon yourself. And he's led to this point where he has the opportunity to come out of himself. There's another person that enters the story, in this case, a prostitute. And I'm sorry, if you haven't read this, you should go read it. I don't know if any of this counts as spoilers. It probably does.
Yeah, it's interesting, but okay, keep going.
Oh, go ahead. If you want to jump in, because I'll just talk about this forever.
What's interesting about the question I'm about to ask about this book is, it's a book, and I think it's a book about reading in general. And obviously part of our goal is to help our readers come out of the ashes. TM, you can read that book next month, as long as you already own it.
And out from the underground.
So what I think is and I always have this debate, right? For example, many people will read summaries or read helps along if they read ancient literature or a lot of older books. And that is sometimes helpful. It's also sometimes helpful to kind of go in knowing what you're reading, already be oriented. And sometimes I hate doing that, and sometimes I enjoy that. And I can't I think for the average reader of this book, the kind of orienting you're doing actually might be helpful. Because I don't know how much of the book and maybe I'm wrong, I'll let you correct me. It doesn't feel like it's built on surprise.
No.
No, I don't
Oh,
think
I
it's,
don't think
I don't
I
think
don't think it's supposed to surprise you by then. In fact, and it's more so almost like every part of it has the seed of the whole, right? Where once you grasp the point, once you grasp what Dostoevsky is doing in constructing this kind of person, that, by the way, is not a fake person. It's almost definitely coming from his own experience, Dostoevsky's own experience, especially pre-conversion. And it, like, if you read it, I'm serious. If you're willing to truly like take this as a kind of mirror and look at it, I think you'd be hard pressed to not see something of yourself in this book. And it's going to be really like depressing and hard. But that's actually the good of it, right? That's the good of it, is you can kind of see a part of yourself in without, like, Dostoevsky doesn't hold anything back in this one. Like, he lets you see exactly how disgusting a narcissistic mind is. And once you see it, you'll see it in yourself. You'll also see, oh, wait a minute, this is our entire culture. You're trained to think like this man. You're trained to be like this man. And that's something that I don't even think Dostoevsky could see, right? I think he could see it coming in this, like a kind of prophet almost, in that he could see trends that were heading that way. And especially near the end of the book, you get some of that from The Underground Man, where he talks about these ideas about how people are like basically trying to remove themselves from the flesh and blood world.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think has, like, in some sense come about, right? Especially with the online world, I think that in some ways has come about. But yes, I don't know. I always don't know either. When it comes to reading like this, part of me is just a fan of, we're just throwing the kid in the deep end, right? Like, all right, you got to learn how to swim. Woo! Because I think the kind of person that will start this, and even if they can read the whole thing, but be like, I don't really like it because I don't get it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much you're going to get it, even if I try to help you. Like, I don't know if you're the kind of person that can yet grasp this. And that's not a diss. Like, I'm not saying I could always get this. It's the kind of thing that I think actually takes work. It takes reflection. It takes time and effort. And you may not be at the point where you can truly get it yet. But I think if you are, and I think a lot of people are, I think a lot of people that listen to this are, I think you could find in this, even if you just grasp the narrative part of it. I think that's enough. I think there's enough there that if you can get through to that, I think it will help shed light on the whole.
So I mean, again, if you are a person and you felt lost, again, I at many times felt like I was barely there. I'm going to actually ask you to try. So here's what I want you to try. So, because I do think the first part of the book is actually the thing that would get people lost, where it is primarily his, it's almost like a philosophical treatise of a clearly angry person.
Yep.
Clearly
bitter, right? I think a better way to describe it is
bitter.
A bitter person, somebody who is bitter at life and everyone around them.
Yeah. I want you to, I'm not asking you to just turn this into a confessional. Can you give an example of where, when you look at what this person does, is like, what would be the kind of thing that would be a mirror?
Yeah. So actually, this is where, it is hard on the first read, on the first go through, to see it at the beginning portion. Again, I think you get it more in the later portions, where you have a man who is, again, extremely bitter about things and slights, like perceived slights from others that aren't actual, that never happened, but from his perspective, these are the things that have happened. But you get to a point where you realize, oh, he just lives in his own head. In other words, he lives in the underground, right? Like, he lives inside of himself. All he can see in other people is what he thinks they're doing toward him, right? He doesn't see everybody else as their own person, as their own, their own creature made in the image of God. He sees everybody in light of himself, as if he's at the center, as if he's the God, and everybody else is reacting in some way to him. Even to the point where he talks about this point where he walks by and, somebody just kind of like runs their shoulder into him while he's passing. This is something this is actually a trope that you've probably like seen in movies or something like that, right? But you just think somebody's just walking down, especially somebody who like maybe they feel really bad about themselves, they're kind of depressed, whatever, and they're walking down the street, crowded New York, cityscape, and all of a sudden somebody just barges past them, and he's kind of like, hey, what was that? And that person doesn't even like respond. They don't even notice him. Right. So I don't remember where that is in the book. If that is, I know that's on the earlier end. I don't know where it is. If that's in the, first portion necessarily. But I know he talks about that. And then this becomes this huge thing, right? This huge deal that somebody would do that to me. I can't stop thinking about it. And I have to find a way to get back at them because they obviously did it to slight me, and they did it intentionally because of this or that. When actually somebody was just walking down the street and they bumped into you. That's it.
Yeah.
So in the earlier part, I actually think what you should see in yourself is he is trying to devise, and this is very common. This is hyperbolized, and it's in an extreme case. So you have to bring it down a notch for the average person. Somebody who is a true narcissist, this is exactly how they think. But where everything about what he says is not necessarily true. You're not supposed to take it as these are true things, but this is the defense that this man is giving for his own existence and his own position. All of it relates to how he sees himself, and it's all an elaborate lie, because if he actually took a look at himself through truth, right, through a true lens, he would realize he is a pathetic narcissist, bitter, and he's actually the one that needs to change, not all these other people. That's where I think you should see a little bit of yourself. Hey, actually, you're the one probably that needs to change, not everybody else. And in an especially extreme narcissistic state, what we do is we create all these defenses for why we, as the center of all things, are obviously not the ones that need to change. We're not the ones that have sinned. We're not the ones that have done something wrong. It's always the other.
Yeah. So there's that. Okay. So I think there are things about that are super interesting and helpful. One, I do think that the basically the only, right, we live in a time where only really what's interior, what you feel, all these things are what matter. And I do think in you that what you are right about is that it does basically turn you into all that there is the interior in me.
Yep.
And I think that is really interesting and helpful, right? I think one way people can see it, right? Let me give the most surface example, and then you just start asking yourself what that says about you. And that's what this book does. Why do you spend time with people you kind of hate? Why do you do that?
Yeah.
And that's something that happens in the book. And it's never put in that basic of vocabulary.
Yep.
But that's a very strange thing to do. People who don't really seem to like you, maybe rightfully, and obviously in this case rightfully, and that you don't seem to like, right? Yeah. Beginning to ask those questions about yourself. I do think probably the big lesson is that what you said, the change probably is something that has to happen with you. Now, I want to ask two questions about the dynamic in the book. And then actually first, let me just say one more thing. One of the reasons this book is considered very groundbreaking in itself is that it is written as a it's almost it's written as like a fake journal. It's
Yep.
not a fake autobiography. It's not a first person narrative. It was written basically, I mean, that's why it's called notes. It's like someone's notebook. And at the beginning it says he had other notes, but it's good we don't have those.
Yeah.
You know.
Right.
And so it is written as if it was someone's notebook. And so that's kind of why, like, on a literary level, it was considered groundbreaking. Obviously, that's part of what makes it not easy to follow. If I gave
especially outside of the like main core narrative, yes, it looks like almost like, hey, here's these scattered thoughts.
Because if you picked up one of my notebooks, even if it was something as like if I had a prayer notebook, that would still seem very scattered, even though it has a very specific purpose. Anyone's random notebook, you know, it would feel this way. And I think there are two really interesting things. I'll go back to him and then I'll come back to one part of the book that I find interesting. So the thing about him that is very interesting, I mean, one of the most famous parts of the book is the way it opens. I don't remember how it opens. It opens with something like "I'm sick" or something like
I have a spot in my, or something in my spleen, and
like and throughout he describes himself as a bad person, as a bad person, as I'm going to do this for meanness, or, you know, like, again, I'm not using the actually high good language. Tell me about how that fits into your read on the character who self-professedly, I'm doing a bad thing to this person and I'm bad. Like,
yep.
I assume you agree with me that he self-professes that kind of, you know, that kind of behavior and even self-understanding.
Yeah, here's the thing. So he does, and yet what you find over and over is there's these like layers of defense.
Sure.
There is never a full and total repentance. There's moments in the book, especially when it comes to what he like clearly sees as like his deepest and greatest shameful act, which is this like basically refusing and shaming this one woman who probably could have loved him.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like this one woman who kind of reaches out to him in love, who herself is in a desperate state. And she reaches out knowing that he's lied about who he is and what he's like, seeing him in all of his squalor and sickness and grossness. She still reaches out to him in love, and he can't receive that. He has to shame her, and almost instantly regrets it, but still does it. He does seem to have a sense of like that's the closest he gets in the book anyway to that was completely wrong. But even here, there's these constant layers of defense. And I think that's part of it. I think that's part of what you're supposed to see, and probably part of what you're supposed to see yourself. And by the way, when I say this should be turned around on you, that's not just me. That's actually part of the book, right? So toward the end of the book, the character literally says, hey, I know this looks bad, but you're all like this. And that's exactly what a narcissist would say on the one hand. Right? Like and so on the one hand, you could say, okay, that's just another layer of defense. Hey, I'm not a bad guy. All of us are bad guys. Right? Like, I don't have to deal with my sin because everybody's sinful. Look at you. You've done it too. On the one hand, you can take it that way, and I think you should. On the other hand, I think you should take that seriously. Hey, in what way are you like this man, right? Are you in the underground and need to come up out of that? I think that there's something to that you're supposed to take.
And I do think that it is actually, in that way, it does work on two levels. Because, again, it is the like, and what Pastor Michael is describing at the end of the book is the closest thing to like edge of your seat reading.
Yep.
Where it's kind of like, obviously I shouldn't do this. Obviously I should completely change how I've been responding to things in my life to respond to this person differently. You know, and it's this, and I
still did it. And I still did what was wrong. I still did what would keep me able to hold myself up in my own mind as such a great a truly great person in some way, right? As better than this woman.
Yes. So, and so what I think that when he says like it works on two levels, you are like this, so I don't need to deal with this. It works on two levels because I do think whether it's narcissism or just again on a lesser level, most people there is a way to admit, it's what we've talked about. I'm so broken. I have all these problems. I'm a broken person. That can as easily be an actual just complete deflection from actually working on anything or actually repenting as actually admitting, well, if you're broken, you need to be fixed.
Yep.
And so I do think that is, I think it is in that way, it's important. The other thing that is interesting, and he says it a few times in the book, he talks about going underground or before I went underground or when he'll use this. What would you say he means? Because you've been talking about that. And I think, again, with that being the title, I think this would be maybe the last thing that, as we were talking about this, he describes it as something that, he's describing it as something he consciously did. And he can apparently remember, when he did it, what that meant.
Yeah. So I think again, this is the kind of going. It's in essence his conscious going underground. I think is a reaction to his already going that way in this this narrative, as he tells it, of his constant turning inward on himself, which he doesn't always tell that way, right? He doesn't mean it like, oh, this is what I'm doing. It's not like the whole time he's conscious, this is what I'm doing, but the turning inward on oneself to such an extent that you go completely interior, right? Like it's, you no longer live in the real world. You are completely in yourself, in the void of yourself. I think that's what he's talking about. And even to the point where at the end, he starts to talk about how, he talks about people who, for instance, hide in books. Today, we wouldn't say people hide in books. We'd say in movies or Netflix series or whatever, where he talks about, we just want to go into these books and live in them, but never live in the real world. We want all of these stories and series and shows that we can live in and through, but never actually live flesh and blood life in the real world, because that requires that we repent, that we feel shame at times because we've done something wrong, and we have to change that. Whereas in a totally online world, or living vicariously through others on a screen or even in a book, like in his day, you can just totally escape and say, well, that's not I'm just inside of this other world, right? I'm hiding in it. But it's not like just hiding in books. It's hiding in essence from reality, from the reality of what the world's like, and the reality of who you are truly, not who you think of yourself, but who you are truly. And you see this too when toward the end he talks about this idea of, there's coming a day where, people don't want to be have flesh and blood fathers. And maybe there's coming a day when we could be born of an idea, right? Disconnected from true fathers who fail and who we're just a part of a fallen, degenerate world. And then we enter into it, we sin, and we do shameful things, and we make fools of ourselves, and we don't live up to this idealized picture of ourselves in our mind. We're constantly falling below that if we look at ourselves in reality. And so you have to just go into a different world. In this case, I think the underground then is inside of yourself, where you can make for yourself whoever you want to be, right? And that is the message of the modern world. Be whoever you want to be. Look inside of yourself. Believe in yourself. That's how you find the truth. And what do we see the consequences of that are? It's just chaos, right? It's do whatever you want with no shame. And of course, you can't ultimately escape it, which is why throughout this book, it keeps coming back to that, where he has to defend it, or some truth almost comes out where he realizes, I know I should not have done that, but you would have done it too. And there's all these justifications, but you're constantly confronted with the real world, right? Outside of yourself, outside of the underground.
Reading Restless. You should read with us. Links in the show notes. We are back. We're so back. We're so much better than ever. We're so happy that you're listening. Subscribe to the show. Read with us. You can read Up from the Ashes if you already own it. As I've mentioned, just to be clear, if you buy this book this month, I mean,
it doesn't count. Read a book that you already own, that's already on your shelf that you haven't read. I'm going to be reading Cormac McCarthy's No Country for Old Men.
Great. And we'll catch you next week. All right, Pastor Michael, we got a little time here. I think it's time. I had this idea. We will workshop this patron show idea and potentially record this patron show idea if you like it. If you don't, I'm going to dig up a tweet to make us feel bad about the PCA or be critical of someone being critical of the PCA. So you either like you like this idea that we can return to, somewhat like we return to Conspiracy Corner. And I don't have a good name for it. It's like something like being based without also being the worst. Like, how do you, I don't know what, we need to come up with a good name for this. So, because I think, again, welcome to Donald Trump's America, where you're going to get sick of the winning, folks.
It's so good. It's so good. Doesn't it feel good?
I mean, it obviously should.
Every day there's something else where it's just like, somebody pointed out the other day, there's this video out of Dr. Phil on the street with Tom Homan, the head of the deportations and things like that. And they're finding this guy who's been like a convicted predator, illegal alien in Chicago. And he's like, Dr. Phil is there like doing almost like a cops type show with like taking these people out. And hey, it's great that like we're dealing with these people in some form anyway. But it's just hilarious that we're now in a world where like it's like the dark Dr. Phil. Like Dr. Phil used to be a lot more like, hey, he's helping people with their problems, stuff like that. And now it's like Dr. Phil mixed with cops.
Yeah.
Which I think is awesome and a good way to represent our current moment.
That is funny. So for now, this is going to be called Being Based Without Being Awful. I don't really know.
Based and normal. What about based and normal?
Based and normal. That's good.
You know the meme where it's like, why can't you just be normal? And then it's like the kid screeching in the back of the seat. I don't know what it's from even. I just know the meme.
I think that's a great one because, again, as people, as you change, right? Like this is why when people became Calvinists, they went into the cage stage. It became horrible. So let's use an ongoing joke we make here on Restless, as we've talked a lot about what potentially one RFK Jr. might do. Let's talk, and I'm interested to talk to you about this. I think this will be a good kickoff one regarding diet and food. Nice. So, Pastor Michael, you will be proud of me. This last weekend, I drank raw milk for the first time.
Yes. And it was good, right?
Well, so as everyone knows,
no.
No, it was good. It was
good. Okay, good.
It was good. I don't drink. I'm in Wisconsin, so by the way, sorry, Mom, who had us all drink that tall glass of milk with dinner every single night. I'm sorry, Mom. I don't do that anymore. I haven't drank dairy in that way since I was 17. And so all I did was I drank this whole milk in my coffee. And so
that's okay.
Yeah. And that's
okay.
And so apparently it was from an Amish farm, well filtered. I don't know what the like protein it is that you all really want in it. The one that
A2 dairy.
Yeah, whatever.
I don't understand all the deal behind this, but so most of the milk that you get currently from like a store or something comes from Holstein cows that produce an A1 protein in the milk. And my understanding is that protein is extremely difficult for the human stomach to digest. And up until like the last 40, 50 years, the average like dairy that anybody would consume was all A2 dairy from small farms, because you'd have cows like a Jersey cow or something like that produces a very different kind of milk, but the Holstein can pump out an unreal amount of milk. And so people just went to that. So even that, by the way, like going just to like raw milk, if it's just still like, Holstein milk. And I think there's technically maybe some Holsteins that can do A2, A2. I'm not like an expert in this area. My wife would know a lot more than me. I just pick up what I can. But my understanding is that the A2, A2, there's a lot of people that are, for instance, they're lactose intolerant. They can't drink milk, but if they have A2, A2 products, they can have it. Like they can take that. And so there's that kind of thing. It's much easier for your body to digest.
Yeah. So I too don't know anything about that. But I had it. So from I went to Presbytery, stayed with the family. This is exclusively what they use, and I had some. And
I don't know who this is, but I want to know now because
I'll have to tell you after. And so they get it from an Amish, an Amish person who sells it. And it's filtered, and they're like, yeah, I mean, we've never had an issue. We've never gotten a message about like, oh no, don't have it. And so,
which now, by the way, so and I know I'm just taking some on tangents,
yeah,
but I've had what I would describe as like kind of funky raw milk, like way out on the boundaries of what I would be comfortable with. And like in part because we got milk from an Amish family once that it wasn't like they produce a lot of milk for people. It was, hey, we bought produce from them and they happen to have a cow and we started to buy milk from them. But the Amish don't have, unless they're set up for it to sell a lot of milk, they don't have a great refrigeration system. And milk will keep best if you can refrigerate it instantly, like right away.
Right.
Cool it down instantly. It keeps a lot longer. In an Amish like ice house, they literally use ice houses a lot of time where they just have ice that they cut, and that's what they use in the summer. They put it in a house, a little building, and that's where they keep all their cold stuff. That doesn't cool down milk, and especially on like 90-degree days, if we were to pick up milk, that milk is like, it doesn't cool down for a long time. It's just going to be funkier. I've had that, right, where it's like, it is not the best stuff you could have. And I've never gotten sick from it at all.
Yeah. And so this was from more of that, like, really to the, whoever this is, I don't know anything about this person. To their credit, very high quality operation.
Yes. So if somebody's set up for it, they're cooling it down instantly. They're doing a lot of the things that preserve it better.
And so obviously good for them. That's great. But so let me explain why I had this. So my wife and I we did not eat any dietary sugar for 10 days. Outside of some low sugar fruit, which would be berries and vegetables. So one of the amazing that I'll give 2 reports about that, and then I will end up asking the question. So, if you have never done anything like this, friends, you are addicted to sugar, just so you know.
We all are.
Like intensely.
Yeah.
We both had withdrawal symptoms. They varied. But like I give up caffeine pretty regularly to avoid getting super dependent on caffeine. This was much more intense than ever giving up on caffeine.
Wow.
For sure.
What happened? Give me some examples, because I currently just gave up coffee and with it any caffeine, and I had some pretty significant withdrawal symptoms for a couple of days. So I'm just intrigued by what you faced.
I'll say my wife had fever symptoms so bad she thought something was horribly wrong.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's likely my wife is a much smaller of build person than me, for those who don't know her. And so, right, small in stature, her body's used to dumping all this insulin in. Like, she would wake up in the night being like, I don't know if I will make it doing this. The other thing, but by the end, I can only say I felt it's like you, at the end, I felt kind of the most normal I've felt.
Yeah.
So I knew some friends who had done something like this, and after they did it, they're like, yeah, we're actually going to try and maintain kind of this. And I, 3 days in, feeling withdrawals, watching people eat things I wanted to eat and couldn't eat. I was like, why would you ever do that? So the reason a lot of people do this, just so our listeners know, other than that you're addicted to sugar, other than that it's bad for you. A lot of people do it for weight loss. That wasn't our goal. But actually, most Americans, because of how insane the American food system is, just
it's crazy.
And we're about to come to why being based in normal this plays in is most Americans are becoming insulin resistant.
Yep.
And so I love you, and I'm telling you this, patron. If you have a normal American diet, you are probably becoming insulin resistant.
Yes.
And so this diet, this kind of diet that my wife and I did, they have people do this for a few months, and it cures type 2 diabetes.
Yep.
It eliminates type 2 diabetes.
Yep.
It reverses all kinds of, I mean, if you begin, as we've talked about the means, we still need to review. Did we already review our thoughts on?
I think we talked about, because you had read it and I had not. So I think we did talk about it, at least.
So if you start buying how many things, like potentially even things like cancer and other things, are related to metabolic health, this is like a thing. And so what a group of functional health doctors, and so you either think they're quacks or you like RFK and you use Michael's soap, which will still be legal here. And what they said is, okay, so we obviously have to have people do this for a pretty long period of time when we're trying to fix extreme results like type 2 diabetes and morbid obesity. And they're like, how long does a person have to do this to get about 80% or like of the results? And they found they can reverse beginning insulin resistance in about 10 days.
Wow.
Now, obviously, if you just go back to, great, now I open a package of Oreos and I eat that, like, again, right? This isn't like a yo-yo, the goal isn't like yo-yo.
Yep. And if you do yo-yo, a lot of times it's worse, right? Because it's not for that. That can be even worse. It can shut down systems.
Right. And so, but again, right, when I first heard a person be like, yeah, we're trying to maintain it, I said, you're an insane person. Why would you ever want to do that? And then by day 10, here's what I thought to myself. I got to figure out a way to maintain this.
Yeah.
Right? My immediate reaction was, I want to maintain this. What will it do? Now, here's the secondary caveat. I'm a few days off. So I had not had any dairy, any coffee, anything. And I'm at this meeting and I'm like, I can have a cup of coffee this morning. That was something I missed. That doesn't have sugar, that doesn't have things. And I go, I want a cup of coffee with cream. And they go, oh, we make great coffee here, and we'll put this raw milk in it. And I'm like, I want one. I'm game. I guess
you got to do it. Yeah.
And so, anyways,
10 days off sugar. I'm ready for raw milk. It changes your brain, Matt.
It probably did. And but now here's another thing. I also don't think, just so everyone knows, I don't think humans we're meant to exist completely without sugar. Because basically what this diet is it's a complete diet without any stimulants, right?
Yeah.
You are only calorie dense, like truly filling things. Also, if you do this, you will lose weight and you will not be counting calories.
Yep.
You again, because there is apparently, just so you know, there is more to these things than raw intake. And what happens, I was at the gym today, back on stimulants, and I was able to lift harder and more because my body is like, look at this new amount of energy we have, right?
Interesting, yeah.
So what I'm not saying is that your body is supposed to never have any of these things. Clearly, there's like God made them. They exist for you. Now, Pastor Michael, when I think about a desire to maintain these things, when I even think about, like, by the end, I was like, I drove by a restaurant that I would normally have been like excited to go to and went, nah, I'm just having my like macros protein bar, which has like 3 ingredients in it.
Yep.
Like that, my mindset, that the way I felt changed enough that my mindset was like, nah. Here's the problem, Pastor Michael. And the reason I'm interested in talking to you about this is not because, though I'm interested in how insane our food system is.
And it is insane, everybody. It's so much worse than you think.
It is. It's so much worse than you think. It truly is. If you, here's a hilarious one. We also make jokes about seed oils. Because I'm part of the big supplement bros, while I was doing this, because I had just gotten so used to being like, man, I need to check if this thing we're going to use in this, in this meal has any sugar or whatever, any, right? Because we're at 0. Yep. If it has anything, again, tomatoes, so we're having a tiny bit there.
Right.
I'm like, oh, I need to go get a replacement supplement. And I turn over like the fish oil supplement I've been buying. I'm like, seed oils.
Yeah. Also, fish oil supplements. Apparently, there's very few that actually work. I'm just saying. This is what I've been told.
You got to know what you're getting.
Yep.
And the majority of supplements are all
it's all trash. It's
all in seed oils.
Your body cannot process them. You're just peeing them out.
And so, well, yeah, you'll always be peeing them out. That will always be the most expensive shot to the bathroom after you take these, right? But and we can talk about that another time. But here's the issue, Pastor Michael. How do you, and I ask you this because Pastor Michael, as everyone knows, is a homesteader, makes a lot of his own food. If you follow him on Twitter,
and I still eat a lot of sugar, by the way. Like I eat way more sugar than I should.
So the conversation here is not about sugar. It's not about should you do what I did. Pastor Michael, if you follow him every now and again, you'll just see phenomenal meals he made completely from his home, right? But here is the caveat, Pastor Michael. If we're saying the food system's broken, it needs to be fixed, we hope things may be fixed over this time. Those things people are going to catch on to these things in an uneven way.
Yep. That
means, Pastor Michael, you're going to go with people either to a restaurant, or you're going to go to people's homes, or you're going to go to a potluck where virtually everything there is being fed by a system that is causing whatever food thing you've caught on to, whatever your mindset is. How does a based person, knowing our food system is broken and actually probably ran by evil people who left the cigarette business to join the processed food business?
Yeah.
How do you navigate that? How do you be based
and you forget, and also Seventh-day Adventists that want to make us all sterile. You forgot that part too. So this is also a thing. I don't know if you've heard this one yet.
Another interesting
conspiracy corner. We'll talk about that. How the Seventh-day Adventists are trying to make us all sterile.
An interesting sidebar, just so you know, that the polycystic ovarian syndrome that causes a lot of women to be have struggles with fertility, as you may have heard or may have known, that when you cut out sugar, those symptoms are eliminated in 2 weeks.
In a lot of cases, right?
In a lot of cases, of course, not everything.
Yes,
not medical advice.
One of the realities that we all have to come to grips with is we are covenantally bound to others and the choices of others and the direction of a society completely apart from ourselves. Meaning, there are choices that the generation before us and generations before us have made that will impact our lives. And it doesn't matter how much you're like, I'm doing everything myself, I'm going to do whatever I want. Like, guess what? You can't escape it.
Right.
There are mistakes that have been made and sins that have been committed that will affect how you can live. And that includes things like our food systems and stuff like that, and our health, right? You think about the nature of epigenetics. Like there's not a one-to-one. Like you may have been born with genetic proclivities towards certain things because of how your parents lived. Right? Like that's just part of life that you have to just deal with. And, I think the way you stay normal in this is, number one, You can't lose the side of this that is every meal you receive, you should just be trusting God, right? That doesn't mean you're silly and you're like, well, then I don't have to care about what I eat. I'll just consume poison all my life,
Right.
No, if you know something's poisonous and bad for you, like you probably shouldn't do it. Now, at the same time, like, if you go back 50 years, you can see people that were seemingly fit, healthy, lived long lives who smoked their whole life, who, drank soda all the time, things like that. Okay. And so now you could say, well, maybe they've added more stuff to our food, which is probably true. Maybe they've added things to cigarettes, which is probably true. Maybe there's things that have gone on that like it has changed. Like we're not having the same thing. And that is true.
Yeah.
It's also true that, for instance, like the produce that we get, even if it's from the exact same spot, if that soil wasn't maintained, you're getting less nutrients than your grandparents did from the same exact crop in the same exact spot if the soil is not maintained. So it's not to say that circumstances haven't changed. It's just to say that anytime you turn into a kind of like a kind of legalist about the world, that everything is a one-to-one. If I do this, this is going to happen. That's not how the world works. Not fundamentally. It is a large portion of how the world works, right? It's not that doesn't matter. It's not that doesn't play into it. But that's not the only way the world works, which means that you could take a hit, for instance, to your diet if it meant showing honor to somebody that's hosting you.
Mm.
Now, if you, for instance, are a woman who's infertile currently because you've eaten a certain way your whole life, you didn't know that would make you infertile, but you as a woman are topsoil, by the way, believe it or not, you're a garden, you're topsoil. You have to have certain things that build you up to make you fertile in a way that's different than men. And if you find that out and you're like, I have to make very serious changes to my life if I'm going to have children, well, like, it's okay to tell people that. And if you're going to somebody's house or something, be like, hey, so, like, just so you know, I'm not like, I can't eat certain things. Here's the way that we deal with that, by the way. My wife has had pretty severe health issues, food-related health issues over the last couple of years, last really 4 years or more, stemming from the last two pregnancies and births of our children and things that happen around those times. And a lot of it is she's fixing just with diet, right? With changing her diet, adding supplements, some other things. And it's going very well. But she's on an unbelievably restrictive diet, like a very extreme. Like if we're going to somebody's house and they ask, well, is there anything we should be aware of? Because most people know this by now. Most
Sure.
people are like, hey, I'm hosting somebody. Hey, is there any allergies? Because everybody has allergies. Why is that, Matt? Why does everybody have allergies? When we were kids and there was one kid in the class with an allergy, and now everybody has severe allergies. I wonder why that is. Why does everybody have a gluten intolerance? Everybody. Even the people that don't think they do, they stop taking gluten. And it's like, why don't I have acne anymore? Why is that? Well, there's a lot of things.
Why can they go to other countries and eat wheat? Oh,
they can eat it all. Yeah. Why is it? Why can they go and eat whatever kind of pasta they want in Italy and never feel like they've had too much and never gain weight? Why is this? Anyway, my wife is on a severe diet. People understand these things. You know what we do? Whenever we're going to somebody's house, what we say is, hey, like if they ask, hey, is there any health things that we should be aware of? We say, like there is a pretty severe like food related things, but guess what? Like just tell us what you're going to make. I can eat pretty much everything, right? I'm not saying it's the healthiest thing for me to do, but I can and I will.
Sure.
That's a choice that we've made. Some of our kids are like that. Some of our kids can't have other things. We'll say, hey, like the things that we have kids that they cannot eat gluten. We have kids that they have deathly allergies to, cashews. So we'll say those ones, right? Because it's not a sin to say, hey, I don't want anything that will kill my child.
Exactly.
But we also don't say it like that, unless it's my friends. And then I'm like, please don't try to kill my child. But for my wife, we just say, hey, tell us what you're going to make. And she will either like bring something to go along with what you're making that she can eat and then eat what she can of what you have, or just bring her own food. And that's not a way to be rude. It's just literally what she has to do to stay healthy and get healthy at this point, for the sake of our family, right? Like it's actually a good thing. And so that's just one example. Just like, it doesn't have to be a, hey, just quick question. Are there any seed oils involved? Right. Like you don't have to do that.
Yeah. Let me, since I'm about to have to go, let me pull some of the applications here. One, you absolutely shouldn't and can't be a legalist about any of these things. You can't turn this into the place where you draw the line, because this is what everyone wants to do. Is we all want to turn new lines on sin, because that's part of sin. Two, I think is important is you're saying things like that. You have to even understand this is a fundamentally actually Christian thing. I would not be surprised if non-Christians would not do this. Is that actually, as a Christian, you say there actually are higher things in the world than my health.
Weightier matters of the law. This is where it's important to remember there are weightier matters of the law. Showing honor to somebody, caring for somebody, loving somebody. There are ways that you can do that.
Yes, but you also aren't saying you eat the bugs. You eat the poison. Right. And so you work with people. But I think the other thing, the actual third application that is actually big is actually this is why you work towards societal covenantal change, because it's the person you're eating with who's like, I mean, well, of course we use I can't believe it's not butter. That's what's good for you. And you're like, oh no, this is engine lubricant. But is not to dishonor that person, but to say like, actually, we have to change these things, because
that comes with what you buy. It comes with how you live, right? It starts with you, right? It always starts with you. Anytime you're doing it wrong, where your first step is something someone else has to do.
That's right.
No, it has to start with you. And let me add that when it comes to this idea of societal change, remember, there were Christians in good standing and still are in all of these companies that are making the decisions that are making everybody unhealthy.
Yeah.
And so when you're in a position where you could make something for others, or you could start a company that makes something that people eat or something like that, what you need to remember is the bottom line of how much money I'm making is not the first priority. Right.
Yes.
That should never be the first priority.
And
it matters, but it's not the first. You need to think about how you actually love and care for those that you're providing something for.
That's right. And here's also why you can't be a legalist. Let me give you a really practical reason. Because when you're like, well, it's my birthday, I want to have bourbon. So for me, I can do that because I do all the right things the other times. That's actually true, by the way. Like, you can do that. That's completely true. But what you've just self-admitted is that means when someone at my church says, here's a hot dog on a store-bought bun, you don't get to go, well, I'm sorry, I don't do that. You've already, like,
if you can do cheat days for yourself,
you can do
cheat love. Days for love. Yeah.
but also
days for love.
Cheat days, I love that. But here's also why when we think about societal change, I'm thinking about this in honor of my wife's grandfather. He just entered hospice. He's a godly man. Praise God. We know whenever the Lord does choose, it's his time. But I was talking to him, and he was telling me, he's like, I remember, and again, I wasn't talking to him because I was trying to red pill him on life. He was just telling me about the farm, like, right, a man who grew up and literally can, like, yeah, I used to live on that house way over there. Now I live here. 90 years. That's what he did.
Yep.
And still is fascinated.
That's the dream, by the way.
And is still, creation around him is so endlessly deep and rich. He's still fascinated by this piece of farm, these square miles of farmland he's known. He was still getting to know. And he was like, I remember when everyone started growing soy. He's like, it used to be this thing, there'd be a tiny bit. No. And he's like, I remember we started growing it during World War II because it was a cheap way to ship calories. And they subsidized it during World War II for that reason. And they said, and we are going to stop in, like, they picked a date, 1948 or whatever. And then they didn't stop. And he said, and then they had to figure out what to do with it all.
Yep.
And he said, and then what was more amazing is it wasn't that we didn't just stop. He's like, every year it was more and more and more, right? So a product that had almost no demand went from zero demand to in literally everything you eat in one man's lifetime. And he watched it happen in Iowa. So Pastor Michael, we would like to help people be based to normal. If there are topics, whether it comes to style of worship service, politics, kinds of things, online, anything like that, where you feel like you're coming to terms with reality and what you need to do, but you need to do so without destroying everyone and everything around you. We would love to talk about those things because this is great.
Give us examples, give us ideas.
Until next time, when we do a conspiracy corner about the Seventh-day
Adventists are trying to make you infertile.
There's the tease, everybody. All right, I'm going to